We're going to go over the handouts that deal with the determinants of supply, which these are the things that are going to cause the whole entire curve to shift either to the right if it's an increase in supply or to the left if it's a decrease in supply. We've already covered the law of supply. We know as price goes up, quantity is also going to go up. There's that direct relationship between price and quantity. So that's why we have the upward slope of the supply curve. So in all these scenarios, we are not changing the price of the product, but we're changing something else. And so it asks you to list there at the top the 5 things. I'm not going to list those for you. I'll go over them real quick, but those are in your study guide notes. The price of inputs, those are the factors of production. This is where it helps to know the previous standards that we've gone over so that you know land, labor, and capital, those raw materials, the labor, and then the equipment costs of producing something. So if it's more expensive to make it, we're going to make less. Every single one of these you want to talk to yourself about as a supplier, what's happening to my profits? If something is eating into your profits, as a supplier you do not have the same incentive to make as many as you did before. So if your profits are going down, chances are your supply is also going down. If something is going to make it cheaper for you to produce, then you're going to want to make more because your profits are going to go up. Increased technology tends to increase supply. Government tools, there are 3 of them. You have taxes, subsidies, and regulations. Taxes and regulations typically tend to reduce supply, and then subsidies, when the government pays you to do something, you're going to do it, and so you're going to make more money. So subsidies tend to increase supply. Number of suppliers, I don't know why I have kids who miss this all the time. If you have more people supplying, then supply is going to go up. If somebody goes out of business, then obviously supply is going to go down. And then future expectations. If you expect in the future prices to go up, you're going to hang on to that supply today and take advantage of that increased prices in the future. If you expect prices to go down in the future, then you're going to try and dump all your stuff into the market right now so that you can take advantage of the higher prices. So when we look at this, you've got 3 supply curves. You've got S1 in the middle. Put it up here real quick. You've got S1. Once again, you have your upward sloping supply curve. S2, because the numbers are getting bigger this way, that has to be an increase in supply, which means back towards 0. S3 is a decrease in supply. So all of these questions you're going to ask yourself, is this a change in the price of this product, or is it a change in something else, just like we did demand? If it's a change in something else, if it's going to cause us to produce more, we're going to move to the right. If it's going to cause us to produce less, we're going to move it to the left. So this says that there is a new trade law that's enacted that has instituted a quota on the number of CDs that we can import. If the government's getting involved and they're regulating and saying we're only going to allow a certain amount as opposed to all that wants to come in, this is going to decrease supply because they're restricting the number. So we're going to go from our original back to D3. The next one says that suppose recording artists choose to release only CDs. So if artists are no longer releasing, this is old, but tape and records, which we are obviously seeing a resurgence in records, but if you're going to have artists only release things on CD, then we're going to see an increase in the supply of CD players because those 2 things go together. So we're going to see from S1 moving away from 0, we're going to increase supply, so we're going to go up to S2. This third one, this is the one where we get confused and people have problems. It says that we are going to reduce the cost of steel, but that's not what we're looking at. We have to look at what is it that we're changing, or what's the question in terms of supply. We want to know how the cost of reducing steel is going to, how it's going to change our supply of CD players. How is that going to affect that? So now it's cheaper to make the CD player. We're not changing the price of the CD player. So once again, we can pick a price over here for all of these. And in none of these scenarios are we changing the price. But what we're saying now, it's cheaper to make it, which means my profits are going to go up, which means I'm going to have an incentive to create more at that particular price. So if it's cheaper to make it because of an input or one of those factors of production is going down, we have more of an incentive because we can make more money, so we're going to move it to the right, S2. If we develop a robot specifically designed to perform something and make it faster than what humans were able to do. So now we're more efficient, we can produce it quicker. Once again, technology tends to increase the supply, so we're going to shift it out to the right. This last one also is one that tends to confuse a lot of my students because we're talking about a minimum wage. There are two different scenarios that we're going to use minimum wage or labor costs. This happens to be an input because we're making CD players. Labor is an input cost. It's one of those factors of production that we're going to look at in determining how much it costs. So in this case, we're going to increase our labor cost. So if it's more expensive to make the CD players because we have to pay our workers more, we are going to decrease the supply if we can't change the price of it, and that's what we're assuming under all of these. We're not changing the price. So we will look later on what increasing and decreasing wages does to the supply of workers, which is completely different when labor is an input cost. So please try and get those two straight. Ask yourself, what am I looking at the supply of? In this case, it's CD players and not the supply of workers. Two different questions. Part C on this, I'm going to go ahead and continue this. Part C, we've got 8 questions there. Some of them are increasing supply, some of them are changing supply, and some are changing quantity supplied based on, are we changing the price, or are we changing something else? Number 1, the cost of manufacturing blue jeans decreased from $20 to $15. Once again, we're looking at the supply of blue jeans. We're not changing the price, but we're changing the cost, how much it costs to make it. So if it is cheaper to make it, our profits are going to go up. There's an incentive for us to make more. So we're going to shift out from S1 to S2. So A is our answer. North-South Airlines is filing for bankruptcy. So if we have an airline company that is going out of business, obviously the number of tickets that are going to be available, because that's what we're looking at, the supply of airline tickets. We have one go out of business, so we're going to have a decrease in the supply of airline tickets. So we're going to shift from S1 to S3. Home computers are more prevalent, paying things online. What is going to happen to our supply of postal workers? Obviously, if we don't need as many postal workers and everybody's using the computer and paying their bills online, we're going to see a decrease in the supply of postal workers from S1 to S3. The next one has a tax being imposed. Once again, we're not changing the price. Just because as a supplier of gasoline, you now have to pay a tax towards the government. That didn't say we changed the price of gas. It says there's a tax that you have to now pay on that. So taxes tend to eat into your profits. Anything that eats into your profits is going to be a decrease in supply. So we're going to go from D1 back to D3. Or S1 to S3. If I keep saying D, I apologize. That S for supply, not D for demand. Standards to receive a nursing degree. That is regulations. It's more, or let's see, increase from 2 years to 4 years. So now it takes longer to get it. Not as many people are going to want to get that nursing degree because the regulations has increased. So the supply of nurses is going to go down, shifting from S1 to S3. So if I've been saying D, I do apologize. The U.S. allows an increase in shoes to be imported to the country. If that happens, that's a regulation. We're opening up the market and allowing more shoes into the United States. So we're going to see a shift in the curve from S1 to S2. It's an increase. Growth hormones used on cow to boost milk production. If we have new technology that allows us to do that, then what we're going to see is an increase in supply of milk. So it's going to go from S1 to S2. And this last one is the one I told you to be aware of when we're talking about the difference between labor being an input and labor being what we're actually looking at, the supply of workers. So this last one I'm going to actually show you up here real quick over here. So if we have a situation, this is the supply of labor. And this is the hourly wage, whatever that is, and that's the quantity of hours that we are willing to make available if that's the situation. This is an old handout, obviously, when we are raising the minimum wage to $5.75, but we'll pretend that that makes sense to us because it is saying that we're increasing it. So Since this isn't an input and we're looking at labor hours in terms of what we're willing to supply, if we are going to increase the pay, what we're going to see is price goes up, quantity supply goes up. The only thing we're doing on this one is moving along the same curve because we haven't changed anything else. What we see here is actually a change in the price, and that's how much we get paid per hour. So make sure that you know the difference between changing the labor costs when it's an input in making something and labor in determining the number of hours or the number of workers that we will have based on how much we are paying them an hour. The more we're willing to pay, obviously this quantity supplied of hours, the quantity supply of workers is going to go up. And so there are 2 more handouts that go with this packet. Based on that information that I've given you and the ones right before this, you should be able to do these by yourself. So for each one of the questions over supply, just like you did with demand, you're going to ask yourself first off, number 1, before you do any of these other ones, the supply of what? What are we looking at the supply of? It's a question mark. Number 2, create your supply curve for whatever product that is and label everything. This is your original price. This is your original quantity. That is the quantity supplied at that particular point. Third thing is it a change in price or something else? If it's a change in price, all we're doing is moving on the same curve just like we did this one. If it's a change in something else, you have to come back over here. Is that something else going to cause me to want to produce more because I can make more money? If that's the case, we're going to shift it to the right. Has to go to the right because the numbers get bigger going to the right. If it's going to cause me at that same price to want to make less available for sale because it's eating in my profits or I can't possibly make any more, then we're going to shift back to the left because that's the way the numbers get smaller going back, and this is 0. So ask yourself those questions every single time, and hopefully that helps answer all of those. Make the curves, make the curves, make the curves, make the curves. When we combine supply and demand, it becomes much easier if you know how to do all these curves and shifting on the same one versus moving them left and right. So work those other 2 handouts. If you have any questions, you need to email me.